Guys, did you know that that one Lego Ninja show from 10 years ago is actually one of my favorite television series ever created? Like, guys, did you know that if you try, you can succeed? Or hell, if you make a show specifically made to sell toys, can it actually be great if you try? Honestly, I consider it probably the greatest piece of media tie-in series ever put to television, due to the show being very lore-intensive and the structuring of each season being its own individual story arc. There's always something to expand upon and a new story to tell. And 10 years later, not only is it still a thing, but most people agree it's still kicking ass. Hell, some people don't even consider it a kid show, which I think is a pretty stupid argument. Like it's just another example of a more mature series that happens to be so well made it can appeal to a pretty much general audience. Now, I actually got into it the night that the pilot aired on Cartoon Network in the United States when I was like in fucking kindergarten, I think, maybe. But all these years later, like, it ultimately still stuck with me. In fact, if it wasn't for this property, me and so many other people wouldn't be where we were today. So yeah, it's not the most popular thing on TV, but it has ultimately gained a well-deserved cult following over the years. And the series overall has remained pretty consistent in quality over the years. In fact, I highly recommend it if you've never seen it, but I wouldn't blame you for not watching it. I mean, like, sure, it is somewhat limited due to the fact that, yes, it is a kid's show and it's a Lego show, but so yeah, it's not gonna appeal to everybody, but don't let those facts distract you from checking it out. Hell, in 2021, the property turned 10 years old. And yes, the 10th anniversary was in January, but for this video, I wanted to include the stuff released within the 10th year. Hell, I was actually gonna make this video like way back in early 2018, but 10 is a much more significant number. I mean, like, shit, it has 2 digits, and let's be real, knowing myself, I would have remade that video twice by now. But remember how I said pretty consistent? Yeah, not everything has been good, so I'm gonna take a look at every season of Ninjago, at least from 2011 to 2021, and if anyone's wondering, I will do updates in the future. I'm not sure how frequently, maybe annually or semi-annually. It ultimately depends on how much I have to say about the newly released content. Yeah, it just depends on how much of it comes next. So we start with what are the 2 pilot episodes, or 4. I guess my gun-owning, burger-eating ass knows it as 2 episodes in a 2-part 45-minute special. And the fact that it's its own thing rather than 2 actual episodes of the full Masters of Spinjitzu TV series always kind of threw me off as a kid. For years, I would refer to this season as Season 1 and Season 1 as Season 2 because Season 1 is a separate story arc, and of course that means Season 2 was Season 3, etc. And I didn't stop that until like 2017 maybe. In fact, I was always confused as to why it was called Episode 1, Rise of the Snakes. Like, shouldn't it be Episode 3, Rise of the Snakes, given that it was the third 22-minute segment? But no, I just failed to realize that these are still canon in the timeline, of course. But technically, they do not count as full episodes of the Masters of Spinjitzu television series. Which you gotta keep in mind, that was the only series at the time. And it's in a different format in some other countries, where the pilot was 4 11-minute episodes, but this is America, we get shot in second period, and the Ninjago pilot is 2 episodes, so that's what I'm referring to it as. But overall, I think these 2 pilot episodes were a really good introduction that knows what it is, and I think succeeds where some of the other shorter story arcs within the show fail. But these pilots are here mainly to establish the characters, both the heroes and the villains, and of course the gold weapons. And it does that well. I like how the plot isn't let's stop this huge threat and have all the ninja become full professionals and shit. Yeah, sure, they do solve the main conflict of Nia being captured, but it saves that stuff for later, and as the series progresses, it becomes more earning. So yeah, it's a simple plot, but it effectively establishes the basis of the world and doesn't do that much, which in this case I think is a pretty good thing. I think the pacing is really good too. It doesn't waste too much time on anything. So yeah, it's not really the greatest thing ever, but it's always a fun time and a crazy nostalgia trip anytime I decide to rewatch it. Now, this is the start of the full series, in which you can really tell that they tried to take full advantage of that new precious 22-minute 13-season time slot. I think they really succeeded with it. For a first season, they cram it with tons of plots and goals, but it never manages to feel overcrowded, which I think is kind of an accomplishment. with the Garmadon and Snake conflicts, the Mystery of the Green Ninja and Samurai X, and all the ninja discovering more about themselves and unlocking their true potential. And this season successfully juggles all those plots at once, and there is a really satisfying sense of progression that never goes too far, while it further builds on the establishment of the team given that it's so early into the journey, well, because it is. And with these developments, they actually incorporate morals into the story, which I think further develop the team, but can actually be used in reality as well. As a kid, I think I did pick up a thing or two from these characters. I think the morality and team building is actually really solid. And it's not pandering in its morals either, which I actually really like.
I put him up to this for today's lesson. I wanted to show you the destructive power of rumors, and that jumping to conclusions can only lead to trouble. Did you ever think to find out if the accusations were true?
Hey, Twitter. But like I said, the overall sense of morality within the earlier seasons, I think further emphasizes the sense of progression. I like how this is just part of the story. You know, Wu doesn't walk up to the screen at the end like Bill Cosby and tell the audience what they just learned. The characters just are themselves, and they learn and improve as a team. However, the main negative with the season include the setup of the issues of repetition I have throughout each continuing overarching story, including Big Bad Guy collects ancient evil thing, which becomes very, very prevalent throughout the entire series. But my other big issue with the season is that I just can't say, it's just really not as just, you know, interesting as the rest of the seasons, really. Like, it is one of the weaker seasons in my opinion, mainly because it's more focused on the team development, but that team development is needed. So yeah, I really don't think it is one of the best seasons necessarily, but it does succeed, which obviously does rank it lower on the list. But I think the show does significantly improve from here, and this was a really well-written, established continuation of the pilots. It also introduced Chokin, the most powerful character. Gotta give it points for that. Like, shit, I feel so bad that they paired him with NRG Kai in the spinner set. Like, his ass would easily lose. Now, this season is kind of a downgrade, but it's not bad necessarily. It just contains one half that is much better than the other half. But in the first half, it just contains a more episodic format, and it still contributes heavily to the narrative, but I think it does feel slightly out of place when compared to the rest of the series. Being that the Mega Weapon portion of the story arc still provides a consistent threat of Garmadon and the Snakes, it's just some new thing every episode, and again, this alteration in formula is somewhat out of place, but it still does a good job of progressing the overall story arc. Obviously, the most prevalent factor being that it does age Lloyd, which, yeah, I don't think it was the best decision to have him as a child when he was first introduced. And his mother, Masako, is like Wu's age, I would assume, given that that aspect of their history is explored in Season 4. So, like, yeah, I guess they kinda had to age him, unless they wanted the story arc to take over the span of multiple years. But, I mean, like, some little bitch-ass kid defeating the Overlord, which I guess would be somewhat potentially hard to take seriously, and it's obviously there to develop his character. So, yeah, I don't really outright hate the first half. I know some people do, but, like, let's be real, the first half is significantly weaker than the second. And I actually really like the second half. It has a really nice sense of build-up, given that it's the lead-up to the, at the time, final battle. Neither side wants to engage in the conflict, but it goes down anyway, and I think it's actually really damn entertaining as a result. And yeah, looking back, it's not as, like, epic, mainly because it's not really the actual final battle. I'm like, shit, when I saw this for the first time, I fucking shit my pants. Again, mainly because of how well executed the build-up was. And hey, I think it earned this conclusion. However, given that this could have been the last season, I do think it could have showed more what happens to the world and characters after the final battle, and obviously it wasn't the end. I jokingly refer to the season as the at the time the final battle. You know, given that I'm not applying context to the original story arc of Lloyd and Garmadon prior to Sons of Garmadon. I feel like they feel like they should have taken the time to be more conclusive. And yeah, this really isn't an issue because it's not the end. In fact, this season ended in November 2012, and Season 3 began in January 2014. So you gotta understand there was like a 13-month period with no new Ninjago, which was, let's be real, was probably the darkest time in my entire life. But then they tried to replace it with Furry Drug War, which yeah, that was cool. Not as fucking cool as this. So and then, boom, January 2014, Ninjago was back, bitch. Rebooted was pretty cool. It wasn't amazing throughout all of it, but I do like the season overall, and it served as a justified continuation. Like, it does effectively show how at the time, the final battle impacted the world and characters, which, like I said, I do think the show needed, and I think the way they develop Zane and Lloyd's characters are great, and I like that they made Zane the focus, not just because it matches the theme, but I do think Zane was somewhat underdeveloped when compared to all the other characters. The twist of him realizing that he's not a human will always be one of the biggest twists of my childhood, and I do believe that part of his character is explored effectively in TikTok, one of the best episodes of the show. Zane being a robot or ninjaroid was never explored that heavily, besides little side gags and character traits outside of that episode, and it's actually interesting to see that side of the character fully explored. And like I said, Lloyd's character development is great as well. I like how we actually get to see him and his father put everything in the past and explore how Garmadon specifically reflects upon his mistakes, and it additionally serves as an interesting subversion of roles when Wu becomes evil later in the season. And again, the way it shows the expansion of the events of the at the time final battle within the Serpentine, even if the overall plot of the Serpentine War is somewhat contradicted as the series goes on. In Season 1, it's that all 5 of the Serpentine were fucking killing each other, so the humans were like, stop being goofy, and then they locked them in prison. Then in Season 3, it's that the Serpentine tried to warn the humans about the Overlord using the power of the first Spinjitzu Master, but then got locked away because they thought they were proposing a threat of war. Then in Seasons 4 and 11, it was just outright snakes versus humans. Who knows, it is entirely possible that they are, in fact, all different points within the war timeline, you know, given that they all have the same ending of the Serpentine being locked underground. And Pythor was cool to see come back, and I think the Overlord really could have been a more interesting villain. However, there is a decent sense of threat surrounding him, given how he comes back actually makes a lot of sense, and his overall impact on the history of Ninjago. But yeah, honestly, he really could have been better, but I do think Zane's sacrifice in the end was really well executed. So yeah, it wasn't like the greatest season or anything, but I think it was a justified continuation that was well paced and established the tone for the rest of the series, and had some really excellent character development overall. The season is fucking insane, I love it. It actually does a lot for 10 episodes, mainly because it felt like way more than just 10, and I think the plot was a really interesting breaking the system type story that manages to do so much to expand the lore and provides a really interesting conflict on top of that. Seeing other elemental masters for the first time as a kid just fucking blew my mind. And the main part of the story of the tournament itself, I think, was really well executed too. I'm glad there weren't just entire episodes dedicated to just fucking dicking around, and the actual tournament is part of the season. That's not really that relied heavily within the entire structure. No, like I said, what it's really about is a breaking the system type story of Chen attempting to steal everybody's elemental powers, which brings a really nice sense of mystery, since the ninja don't really know the conditions of the island surrounding them, and if anything is true. And hell, I think the ninja being first lured into the possibility of Zane being alive, I feel is just kind of the one flaw in his plan, but it makes the ninja suspicious far before any of the other elemental masters. But by the time they realize the actual conditions of what they're being faced with, they're already enslaved in a goddamn noodle factory. But actually interfering with the conditions of Chen's island is such a great aspect of that storyline, both with Cole and Zane trying to get out of the factory, and Nia and Dareth sneaking into the property. And the way they reintroduce Zane I think is great and is completely justified. Now, if you couldn't tell, Zane is my favorite ninja of the group, mainly because of what they do with his character throughout the show. Now, in the final scene of Rebooted, it's kind of implied that, yeah, he's still out there, which may just contradict what just happened, which may make his sacrifice less effective. But the season, at the same time, implies at the beginning that he's still out there. But that doesn't mean his ass is getting reunited with any of the other ninja anytime soon, mainly because of the system in place separating the opposing sides. The season itself does have a really interesting sense of mystery behind it, both in the tournament, nobody knows who to trust, everybody's up each other's ass the entire time, and the season also continues the Sensei Garmadon character arc, and I like that he's basically the role of Wu the entire season, which effectively develops his character, you know, given that he has connections with Chen. However, my one major issue with the season is that the way that Chen is written, I do not like that they made him a comic relief villain. You see, the thing about Ninjago is that it's not a particularly funny show. Obviously, there's lots of dumb kids jokes, but they're not cringy at the same time. So yeah, it's not cringe, but it's not, like, that funny either. There are some good jokes now and again. Comedy, I would not say, is one of the show's best aspects. But Chen's personality, I thought, was just incredibly out of place for his character. Like, if his character, if written differently, could be significantly more threatening. Like, this guy is a war criminal who's proven to be capable of emotional manipulation and successfully built up a criminal empire and owns a fast food joint. But to me, he just comes off as if, like, Gus and Sol switch personalities. I mean, like, shit, they both do run criminal empires and restaurants. So yeah, I really don't think the villain was that threatening, mainly because of a bad writing decision of making him comedic. Yeah, but besides of a somewhat out-of-place villain, I just think this is a great season.
He likes.
Ghouls.
Son of a bitch. What are you talking about now?
Funny little green ghouls.
What? Like in movies and cartoons?
Little green ghouls, buddy.
Don't write ghouls. I'm not. I'm putting travel. Jesus Christ.
Now, I think Possession, much like the first season, successfully accomplishes a lot in the storyline, but also takes a lot of risks in the story. Now, given that the scale, I feel, is much higher in this one, we actually get to see a lot of more new locations, and it never manages to be forced or overcrowded. This season does provide a lot more just outright slower moments, which provides a really nice sense of interaction. I like how the imagery is a bit darker too, mainly because, well, it's about ghosts. Also, I think Morrow is a great villain. His motivation is in place, and I think it's interesting to see somebody who was emotionally affected by the assumed destiny that turned out it wasn't true. And I do feel like he could have gotten more development, which could have made his revenge more effective, but I still think it's interesting enough nonetheless. Like, it's cool that they took the concept of the other elemental masters from the previous season and were like, fuck it, let's make one a villain. But on that subject, I do think the Cloud Kingdom stuff was kind of dumb. It's basically where all the gods of the universe decided every decision ever made. So yeah, I guess Zane's heroic sacrifice, that was a guy with an ink and quill. Not his own obligation. Maybe this could have been like the heaven of the show, given that the departed realm is basically hell. Not the cursed realm, the departed realm. This season also introduced Ronan, and Ronan is easily the best side character in the entire show. I consider him more of an anti-hero than an outright villain. You know, he's always on the side that benefits him more personally. Like, he is an asshole, he's a thief, he's a sleazy businessman and a badass bounty hunter all in one. I love him, no homo. Like, it's actually cool to see the concept of other people besides the heroes and villains trying to get Ancient Evil Thing, considering so much of the series consists of Ancient Evil Thing. Like, the season actually does build a nice sense of competition between the two opposing sides, given that so many new locations are featured. Nia's character development is great too. It's interesting to see her switch roles in the group. You see, kids, I remember back in the day when we didn't know who the Green Ninja was. People, including my dad, were saying that it was gonna be Nia, mainly because I guess that made sense. And keep in mind, all the Elemental Master bullshit wasn't established yet, so I think anyone could really be one if they wanted to. Nia, in that season, just never really showed any interest in becoming one. Also, women can't be ninja. Get back in the kitchen. It actually makes sense why Nia becomes the Master of Water. You know, given that she's Kai's brother, and the season is about ghosts. Now, obviously, I guess that's pretty common knowledge that water kills ghosts in most mythology. But when I first learned that, I assumed it applied to all media. So when I was a kid, prior to Possession, obviously, when I was watching Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and I was wondering why Moaning Myrtle was getting in the goddamn bathtub and not disintegrating, like, that's not even the worst part. The worst part about this character is that Shirley Henderson, who is 55, by the way, who was 37 when the Goblet of Fire came out, and, you know, Daniel Radcliffe was, 16.
Myrtle? There aren't merpeople in the Black Lake, are there?
Ah, very good.
Oh, well, shit, they don't call her Moaning Myrtle for nothing. I like how her true potential is the fact that she's getting over of her flaw of giving up on things too easily. And the ending of Morrow's redemption, I thought, was really well executed too. He realizes the consequences of his actions and he accepts that, damn it. He just lets himself die, which I thought was pretty bold to see for the first time as a kid. So yeah, overall, I really like this season. Shit, Skybound is right, there's a lot of sky, and they're bound in it, and I think it's also excellent, by the way. But I think what really carries the season is what of both the protagonist Jay and the antagonist Nauticon. and I think Natakan is the best villain in the entire series. They take full advantage of the concept of his character being a djinn, and I love just the pure evil subtlety incorporated in his character. He knows how to perfectly subvert the directions of the Wish Demander and knows damn well what he's doing while he's doing it. Like how he specifically takes advantage of Kai's own insecurities as a person. One of my favorite scenes in the show is just the scene of Zane and Natakan playing chess. It's just two highly intelligent minds attempting to outsmart each other in a confined space. It's so subtle, but I think it's also intense as hell. And I think Natakan's crew is just excellent. In terms of the diversity and giving them all personalities, they just went like full Kill Bill on that aspect. Like, some designs are not only just fun, like Doubloon only being capable of 2 facial expressions and Clancy, who is very clearly a hybrid Venomari and a Chondri, but I like how the designs of his crewmates showcase all the different types of people he's capable of fucking with and how he could fuck them. Like, he just got some cool designs like Flintlock, who I think is a really excellent side character and a complete badass, but also Monkey Wrench, who is a monkey. Come on, it's Monkey. Monkey is epic. Isn't that right, Ronald Reagan? But I also think Jay, as a protagonist, was really great as well. You know, I wasn't actually really kind of expecting that, given that Jay is more of a comic relief character, but you really wouldn't expect him to be a well-executed leading man. But no, I actually like how they build on his personality. And the way that he's so hesitant toward Natakan, I think creates a really interesting dynamic. And his motivation of knowing what happens between him and Nia next, combined with his genuine care for the rest of the team, he actually serves a really good role of the protagonist of the season. And the way that all the ninjas slowly get killed off is kind of intense as hell. It's just kind of unpredictable what type of event is going to happen, given the reality that any character could be brought into any specific type of reality. And the way the side characters were incorporated at the end as a backup crew was just really cool to see. Echo Zane was a really interesting side character, even if they really didn't do that much with him. But I think the ending was a really emotional moment that, due to the fact that it displays a reversal of time, once again, it takes advantage of what Natakan is capable of, but this time, it doesn't benefit him, which is a really interesting change of pace. And the fact that the wish is made at the very last moment when all hell is broken loose makes it so much more impactful. Alright, remember how I said the pilot succeeded where some of the other shorter story arcs within the show fail? Well, this is in fact a fail of epic proportions.
That's what the kids call epic fail.
In fact, I consider it the first official dud for the series now. The biggest issue isn't the concept, but rather the direction of making it a special. But unlike the pilot, which is just a simple introductory of the concept, this concept is so many villains coming back, which means it's pretty high in scale. Unlike the pilot, which is the same length as this. Like, I remember when we first got confirmation that this was gonna be a special, not a season, people were fucking pissed. I mean, like, I can't really blame them. I was kinda pissed too. I'm like, the concept, once again, is very high in scale. But in this, due to the fact that it's so limited within the time constraint, there's just so much happening, and it's just kind of hard to take seriously. Again, because they just cram so much into a single time slot. However, I don't dislike the specific returning villain choices. However, I do think Klaus probably should have been in this, you know, given that he's actually still out there, as of Skybound. But the villains of Samakai, Cryptor, and Kozu are all side generals of Garmadon. And let's say if they brought back Garmadon and the Overlord, that would just kind of make no sense and would be overkill. So we're just kind of stuck with the side generals, which means they could have gotten significantly more focus and could have been significantly more interesting as a result. But again, there's so much happening, we really don't get enough focus for all of the villains, even if the ones that they could have resurrected specifically to further develop, given that they're side generals, and you know, they really aren't intended to be the most interesting villains, and I think all 3 of these characters serve the role fine. Now, part of the main group of antagonists, and not the side generals, yeah, they really could have done something more with these types of characters. Also, Chen is in this, hooray, who I've already established I think is incredibly out of place in terms of how he was written. And due to the fact that there's really not a army or system in place, he was just outright annoying in this special. Like, fucking shut up. But what they did with Moro, I actually really like how they continue his redemption arc from possession. Unlike Pythor, who was just evil again, and not a ghost because he's still alive in the timeline, I'll give him credit, thankfully they just didn't throw all continuity out the window, like they didn't acknowledge Skybound at all. Natakan wasn't one of the returning villains. But Sensei Yang really wasn't that interesting, and I guess his send-off could have been an emotional moment, but there's just really not enough build-up again because of the time constraints. I also think another instance of huge wasted potential within this season is the themes it could have explored. You know, it's clearly established that nearly all these characters have lost someone important in their life, and it would have been interesting to expand upon that aspect of their characters. That's something that happens to all of us now and again, and that really could have been emotional and excellent development, but like once again, like it's just kind of brushed off like, yeah, they're dead, it kind of sucks. Doesn't really display how it affected them as a person at all. Which again, given that the theme is about The Departed, it really could have explored that. Also find it hilarious that the Netflix poster at one point used impact font. A really dank meme, guys.
Hey y'all, come look at this.
Episode 69, A Line in the Sand.
Now, I don't think the season is particularly bad. It's just like, the first episode is great, but then it's just really not the most interesting conflict from later on. And I feel like they could have done much more with the themes and concepts, much like Day of the Departed. But I think there's just so much exposition that it feels like it just kind of ended before it really began. And it's probably the most forgettable season overall. Mainly because it's not terrible or anything. I actually do really like some aspects, like as how they portray time travel as a not easy thing to do, and a scientifically dangerous concept that is incredibly easy to mess up and is something you really should not be fucking with. But I felt like it should have done more with the time travel stuff, and I think it could have developed the lore maybe more. And maybe with Niakai and Wu, aspects of the plot could have been better. Like the Vermilion trying to collect all the metal plot point just went on for like way too long. And the 3 Vermilion side generals I thought were all incredibly forgettable side general characters to the Vermilion. But I do think the presentation just ultimately could have been better too. Like there are stakes in this story. It's a fine plot overall. But stuff like Kai and Nia being reunited with their parents just could have been like this big emotional moment. But no, like I just kind of forgot that even happened. Or like Wu's sacrifice at the end, which I know technically isn't a death, but this should have been a big emotional moment. And it does set up his arc in Hunted, which I love his arc in Hunted, but like, this is just kind of lame. Like, it's not cringy as you're watching it, but it just doesn't stick with you, you know? Like, it doesn't leave you wanting more. It doesn't have, like, oh, goddamn, that was such a good plot aspect to it, like Skybound. Like, I just think it's really forgettable. You don't really realize that as you're watching it, but, like, compared to everything else, when you recollect upon it, I just can't bring up as much about it. So, yeah, again, much like Day of the Departed, I think there was tons of wasted potential conceptually and thematically, but unlike Day of the Departed, I don't really consider it bad, though. Like, it just kind of exists. It's fine, whatever.